practice. If nothing else, the backstops are there. In the future, if this is a success and we have more money down the road, we can maybe develop those into additional fields. One of the important parts of this project is we're looking at connecting a pedestrian bridge to connect Kirby Park on this side of the river to 29th Street on this side. We think that that's going to really increase the value of this park.
I think that's one of the most important additions to this plan.
For those of you familiar with Kirby Park, it's an extremely popular place for practicing for soccer and other sports. You go out there on Saturdays and it's covered with people practicing soccer. We're going to develop some new practice fields along this flat area down here, and people will be able to come across if they're overflowing and give them some additional practice fields. We're going to clear the shoreline along there and install a little bit of riprap to help with the erosion there. To basically, an important part of that is we think visibility, being able to see that there's stuff across the river, is very important. That'll attract people to go across the street and use the facilities over here. This area up here is not really developed. It's not really optimum for practice fields. It's kind of rocky and stuff. We're probably just going to seed it with wildflowers and let it kind of grow naturally. We're going to have a new system of walking paths around this entire facility. So basically walking is another huge pastime out there at 29th Street. So that gives people an additional they can cross and do that. Or parents that are watching their kids practice, they can walk around while they're doing that. These existing parking lots will be resurfaced. This area up here, there's actually two areas we're looking at. This first area, we're talking about, we had the idea that a new BMX track would be a good idea.
You might explain to people what that is?
Yes, basically, and I've got a picture here in just a minute, but basically bicycles, kids that go up and down in the hills and they, have races, and it's kind of a BMX course.
Then why are we getting rid of that big hill?
Mostly, yeah. Well, that's
if we're going to do
one of the
this.
things we're talking about is the hill, that dirt, we're talking about possibly letting them use that to create this BMX course. That'll save some money reusing that
What's
dirt.
it going to cost to demolish the hill?
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I'll get to the slide.
A lot of the issue with the hill is, one, the structures on it are dilapidated and need to
Well,
go away.
the
And
hill's
secondly,
one issue. The
it's-
structures are a separate issue.
And the hill itself is an ADA access issue. So getting from the parking lot up to this hill and back down to the bleachers and down to the fields becomes a nightmare from an ADA standpoint. So by putting that down lower again, it helps solve all of those issues. And we can reuse the dirt in another location.
Yeah, and it's not a complicated process, so it's just basically getting some big equipment to go out there and pick up all that hill and move it somewhere else.
We're moving a hill.
Well, we're moving.
Is that what we're saying?
Getting
It's
rid,
a
we're getting
hump.
rid of
It's
the
really
dirt.
not a hill. It's a hump.
Yes. And we can't really use, I think you were suggesting maybe use the BMX there, but that's basically just one hump is what Rick was saying. We're talking about a bunch of little hills in a track, so it's a very different concept. It's a good idea, though.
They didn't have those in Kansas, Mayor.
We had lots of dirt.
Flat.
No hills.
No hills. Not in western Kansas.
Exactly.
Number 14 on here shows a new toilet. There it is, a little red dot right there. We are showing this as an alternate because that's something. There is a set of toilets at Kirby Park, but it's a long ways from here to over there. So this is going to get a lot of use. This is a community park, so we're looking at possibly adding a toilet there. So
Restrooms.
yes, restrooms. And then the BMX track, what I started to say is there's a local group that Carl has been in touch with. They have agreed that if we provide them the space, then they will build the track itself. So we're talking about providing them the dirt, but they will do the work to provide the track. And if it's a big hit, which we think it might be, it is in other cities, in other towns, there's another big flat area here that we could potentially in the future use either as more practice fields or a larger, more official BMX race track. Because this is really more of just kind of a practice, fun BMX course, but actually creating a BMX race track with the ramps and the finish lines and all that. So that's a space where we
Does
could
it not
potentially
make
do that.
sense to design that into it as we're looking at this plan, just to make sure we're utilizing the existing design for the BMX?
We could look at
in
that,
addition
yes.
to that? Because I hate that you just design a little bit with the potential. I think it ought to be designed as a project and might
I
have.
could certainly look at doing that. The thought was that even if we build the bigger one farther down, they would still have the other one as a practice field for them to go out there and warm up and practice.
You wouldn't connect them as one big one.
Probably not. So this is an example of what the pedestrian bridge would look like going over to, looking across to Kirby Park.
I think that's fabulous.
This is what I'm talking about for the BMX track. So. And maintenance of that track, I'm not sure how to go back on this, but maintenance would be handled by that organization that's running that. The costs, you can see that rehabbing the fields, the bridge, the BMX, bathrooms, walking trails, design fees, total cost of $1.485 million. I'm showing additional costs by others. Those are costs like developing the BMX track, some other costs that are going to be in the project, but I think other people are going to take care of, so they're not part of this budget. Recurring maintenance costs. And again, if you have questions on this, I've got Carl and Roger here. They'd like to address this, but basically, personnel, annual additional personnel costs, operating costs, a total of $93,000 a year, personnel and maintenance costs. So these are some reasons why we need this field or need to have this developed. Of course, additional practice space is number one. Recreation, they'll be able to host more programs. That gives them an area that they can expand to. The sports complex is great, but it's sometimes overflowing, and they could use an additional field during tournaments to go play on. We could still lease it to Northern Little League for games if they need it. The USACOE, we lease the land from them, and we lease it for recreation, so we need to continue to show them that we're using this land for recreation. Otherwise, we could have issues with them down the road. Again, we have a lot of different youth sports that will be able to utilize this. Introduce a new youth sport opportunity with the BMX, the additional trails, an expansion of space for Kirby Park. Basically, we're expanding Kirby Park. Carl, I don't know if you have anything you want to add or just.
Well, why don't we, I have a couple of questions and then certainly some discussion on the maintenance and operating costs. But one of the issues when you go out there is certainly 29th Street itself, which is really rough, right? So the question mark is, we're going to do this park, which, again, I support. It was approved as part of the plan with the half-cent sales tax, so it is something that the public said we want and supported it, so I'm excited about that. I think the bridge is key to this park, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited that we're adding this BMX element to it and making it more dimensional, as well as the walking, hiking trails. But in order to get to it, you got to take that off when you come
Riverside
off
Golf
of,
Course.
yeah, when you come off at 29th and go up to it, it's kind of rough.
In conversation with Patrick and his group, that is in the works to be redone in the next year or two. So
And what is the timing on this project right now?
we're probably talking about completion in about a year, depending on some factors, how quickly we can get people on board and stuff.
So it's pretty immediate. Yeah. Yeah, Lucy, please.
Hey, Al, I just wanted you to go back. The mayor had touched it briefly where this money was coming from, but I'd like for you to explain to the public as far as that this money was specifically designated for this sports complex.
I'll let Carl address that because
For the
he's
fact
been
that-
involved with this from the beginning.
The fact that we may get the questions of, hey, y'all are fixing this when we don't need to be fixing that, and they don't realize that money is allocated just for that.
I can
But
probably
remember,
answer.
it's COSA
Over intent,
DC. To get very specific about it, COSA DC manages the half-cent sales tax fund. And these dollars have been set aside specifically for this park. And it's been sitting there for how long? 10 years? 10 years. So this is not a new project that all of a sudden we're talking about and looking at the money. The monies are specific for this project and cannot be used for any other project. It was voted on by the citizens, and that's an important part to understand.
That's correct.
This was a key citizen request to have this area. And I'm glad we've delayed it to a certain extent, because I think having new ideas come to the design from what the original design was broadens the aspect of the park and makes it a lot more dimensional for more individuals. So I think the time frame on this has been good.
Right, with the development of the sports complex and the complex that was done on College Hills Boulevard by a private citizen changed the focus of what's needed out here, what's necessary. So that allows us to, like you said, broaden the scope and introduce some other stuff that I think is going to be great for this area.
I think it's great. Do I have other questions? Yes, go ahead, Harry.
Just a real quick comment. I know that Councilman Thompson and I visited this probably four years ago, this complex, and we talked about this. What I really like about not only rehabbing this area, but I like the connectivity back over to Kirby Park. And I think that will open it up for many more people to be able to come over to this facility. I certainly would be interested to know, from Patrick's perspective, Mayor's question is, when is that road going to be fixed? Because it is pretty rough. It's tough to have people go up that particular road.
Harry, to answer that question, that road is on our radar to be repaired as we go forth. Really waiting for this development to happen before we do that. The impact of all that construction going up and down that road will just further deteriorate it. Let's get it to that point, and then we'll come back and we'll rehab that road so that we don't have that major impact on that road at that time. So,
I agree with that, and I appreciate the fact is that, but as long as we're going to work on it, when this is done, I think it's an opportunity for us to do what the citizens asked us to do several years ago.
Yep. Agreed. Carl, you want to come forward and talk to us about the operation maintenance costs? Or somebody.
Morning, Mayor.
Good
City
morning,
Council.
Roger.
I'm Roger Havlock. I'm the Park Senior Manager with the City of San Angelo. So the maintenance cost that we are estimating, initially we're going to need some startup capital equipment, whether it be vehicles. I believe you'll have y'all's list in the packet here, but we're looking at mowers, trailers, different things like that we're going to need to properly maintain that site. I am proposing to actually try, instead of asking for a full-time employee for that position to take care of that site, I have proposed to city management that we consider looking at turning my seasonal position that is out at the sports complex right now. It's a position that we have had a horrible time trying to fill. Over the last 6 to 10 months, we've only gotten like 3 applications, and that has gone on for several years now. We have much better luck with full-time positions with benefits. So what I'm proposing is actually filling that or converting that position into a full-time position, and then using that person half-time at East 29th in the mornings and half-time in the afternoons at the sports complex. And that way it could benefit both, and I don't have to be asking for a full-time position. I already have a little over $14,000 budgeted for that seasonal position, and so it knocks it down from about $40,000 down to about $23,000 or so for that position.
I think it's a great game plan, and I appreciate you looking at it holistically and coming to.
I think it could benefit both.
Yeah,
both,
I think it's
and
great.
as well as save some money on that end for that. As for the other maintenance cost on an annual reoccurring basis, obviously you'll have the position that we just spoke about, but there's other things: water, overtime, equipment, vehicle cost. All of those things are listed. We're looking at roughly $70,000 a year for that. About half of that is water. About $35,000 was what I'm estimating for that.
Are we looking at any level of having sponsorships, selling sponsorships or naming rights for this
Yeah.
facility?
Carl, did you want to cover that? Okay. 'Cause, 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 'cause,
Yes, that's definitely a possibility, and we'll work with Citywise Marketing to try to get them to find some.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Larry?
Yes, ma'am. My question might be better answered by Mr. Torres concerning the prefabricated restrooms. Is that a steel construction over a concrete slab?
We're looking at a prefab restroom, similar like we've done in a lot of the other parks.
And is that like a steel frame?
It's concrete.
All concrete,
Yes, sir.
okay. And
It's
I
concrete,
assume
vandal-resistant, the automated locks,
ADA?
ADA compliant, yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you,
It's
sir.
off the hill. It's off the hill. It's off the hill.
Off the hill.
In this case, the restrooms are not included in the cost estimates. That would be something that would be considered later. He just wanted to note where they would be placed if they were ever put in. So not in the cost estimates now, right, Al?
Well, no,
They would have to
I have them in there.
Okay, the cost.
They would
wasn't
have
there.
to
Okay,
be.
then I'm
But we're
correct.
gonna-
I thought-
Community-
That's my mistake. I thought
Yeah.
they were conceptual because
that's
we
part of it, but
have
we're-
restrooms across and we would decide later. But right now you
We
have
are
them
going to
added
list it
in.
as an alternate, so we can have that decision
Yeah.
I'm
later.
sorry,
No,
my
they're
bad. They're
there.
in there, they're just as
They're
an
in
alternate.
there. Okay. All right, with that, do I have a motion to approve item A?
So move.
So moved by Harry, seconded by Larry. Public comment, please. Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving item A, say aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved, 6-0.
Now we can say Al Torres moves mountains.
He moves hills. All right, item B is consider awarding TIPS agreement number 200201 with King Consultants for an amount not to exceed $1,500,000 to update the North Amcon hangar to the Shell rent requirements using $196,204 from the airport fund balance and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. Jeremy, you're on.
Morning, Mayor, council, staff. I'm excited to be with you today. I'm Jeremy Valgartson, representing the San Angelo Airport. I'm excited again to come and discuss the welfare of the airport. This one's exciting for me. As always, if you're not familiar with the North Amcom hangar, it's a pretty neat hangar. It's got a lot of history to it, but it's actually built in the 1970s as part of the initial Mitsubishi aircraft facility as stage 2 of stage 4 when they delivered that aircraft. In 2006, the U.S. Army took it over as part of the U.S. Army Aviation and Missile Command, known as AMCOM. And what they did is they'd take helicopters in there that were destroyed or damaged during war. They'd fix them up and send them back into the service. So it was a pretty neat facility. They vacated it in 2016, and it's been empty since then, and quite frankly, been falling apart with all the windstorms. We've been using it to store all of our tractors and airport equipment in the meantime. U.S. Customs and Border Protection approached us because it is right between their two hangars and said our drone program, our unmanned aerial vehicle program is expanding and doing well, and they wanted to expand in San Angelo, so they proposed to lease that hangar from us. As you recall, back in September, we signed a lease with Customs and Border Protection for that hangar. And part of that lease, they requested a certain amount of improvements were done just to make it, to meet fire code, to meet all city code, so they could occupy it. We estimated that would cost about $1.5 million on our end to get that project done. We were just gonna maintain the hangar bay itself, and then they were gonna, Customs and Border Protection was gonna fix up the offices and all the storage areas on each side of the hangar. We did sign a 5-year lease with Customs and Border Protection. That lease will take effect as soon as they take occupancy, once all these improvements are done. It's a 5-year lease with 3 5-year options, so we've got 20 years there with Border Protection. The first 5 years, we get $193,260 a year in rent. Here's the shell rent requirements, and I won't go through all of them, but basically, we just need to get the hangar back to operational like it was when AMCOM was in there. They're not asking for any additional improvements other than what it takes to get occupancy. The other part of this is that large AMO hangar is not sprinkled, and they're requesting or requiring us to sprinkle that hangar as well to maintain current code. However, Customs and Border Protection is going to pay for that fire suppression system. They have to run it through us. They're going to pay us over a 10-year period. So that amount will be taken out of our total over the 10-year period. This is just a draft, a sketch of what the hangar looks like. I know it's kind of hard to follow, but you see the middle area, that's our responsibility, is to maintain that middle area. The biggest cost here is obviously fire suppression. The two wings on the top of the page and on the bottom of the page, those are going to be maintained and fixed up by Border Protection. They're estimating to put about $1.5 million of their own money into that, the rest of the hangar. Here's the scope. I kind of already talked about it, but we need to put about $1.5 million from our estimates into it. Border Patrol put about $1.5 million. I talked about the fire suppression system. That $812,000 will be paid back to us over the 10-year period. The white box, I want you to focus your attention, because this is us spending money and efforts to make money so the airport can continue to be self-sustainable. And this would actually help me get my 2 additional employees that I've been carrying on the books for a while. We could fill those positions and help beautify the airport. The current lease rate from the 3 Border Patrol facilities, actually it's just the 2 Border Patrol facilities right now, is $219,757. After they get occupancy and we get all 3 leases, we'd make $587,316 a year. So this would really help my operating budget. Here's the funding, and the good news is I'm not requesting any Costa DC funds. I'm not requesting any general funds. Michael and I and Tina sat down and figured out how we could do it with our 220 operating budget. Because we've got the CARES Act, CARISA Act, the bill money from the federal government, we've been putting all of our salaries towards that, so the FAA has been paying our salaries through those programs. So all the money that we have budgeted for our salaries, we have been setting aside. So I'm proposing to use our salary savings, technology capital, and utility savings. That's going to get us up to $1.3 million and some change. That's going to just be an internal budget amendment. What I'm asking for from you today is I will need a little bit of fund balance so I can get that $1.5 million to get the project done. So I'm seeking $196,204 to be taken out of my fund balance. My current fund balance is $554,000. So that will leave me a remaining fund balance of $349,000 once I get my $1.5 million. So what I'm looking for is to award King Consultants. We have a TIPS agreement with King Consultants. I actually brought them out because we found asbestos in the hangar. They have to remove the asbestos, and then he said he can do the rest under his TIPS agreement. So I'd like to use King Consultants so we can get on it quickly. His estimate's about $1.47 million. You know how things are going today, so I'm requesting 1.5 just in case there are any overages on anything. And then I'm also seeking, as I said, authorization to use $196,000, $196,204 in fund balance to get my 1.5. So, any questions?
I think this is an exciting project, and it really helps us take that airport facility to another level and really helps us complete and add to the planes, trains, and automobiles strategic plan. And so I am very supportive of this. Tommy?
I'd move approval, Mayor.
Okay. Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor of this item, please say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 6-0. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Item C, consider resolution allowing the adjacent property owner to remove a tree in the public right-of-way adjacent to 15 West Beaugard Avenue per section 7.02.034 of the City Code of Ordinances. John, you're on.
Thank you. This may look familiar. Again, John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. You recently saw a case where the adjacent property owner had requested removal of a tree, and this is next door. Very similar tree, appeared to be planted at the same time, same sort of damage to the sidewalks, and so they're asking basically for the same thing as you approved on the adjacent property to remove the tree. There you can see a picture of that existing tree. You can see here was the tree that was recently removed, and you can see how they've repaired the sidewalk. It's a
I
little
don't see the new tree.
No, well, and I'll get to that in just a second.
Until we see the new tree, I'm like, that was very specific, so.
They've matched, the construction of that it matches the Chadburn Street project with that sort of gray brick look, and so these folks will match that as well. You can see here a small hole that will be expanded onto this property, and that's where the tree will be planted, and then they'll replace another tree. So once they complete all of the sidewalk and tree removal on the adjacent, then they'll finish out with the trees on both properties.
Do we have timing on that?
We do not. I know they want to move quickly, and so I don't anticipate any concerns with that being delayed. They're just waiting for the other work to get done so that they can get the trees in. I'm guessing they'll probably want to wait till it's not 108 degrees out to do that, though. This is just a kind of a rough sketch. Again, the 2 tree wells will be done as part of the construction of the sidewalk, and once that's done, they'll be able to plant those trees. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have questions for John James on this item?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I've noticed a lot of the pistache trees are dead around town, primarily due to the previous blizzard and another cold winter. Is that the optimal tree to replant here?
I would defer to maybe Rick or Carl or something.
Carl
who
here,
knows more
is
about
Roger
trees.
here?
I will say that we would require them to replant in cases where required trees go in. If they do die, then they would be required to replace it if it does die.
Which is fine. I think he's just asking that we make sure that the tree that's selected has a hardy base to it, and
I think the answer.
Biggest selection, the biggest obstacle they were trying to put in front of us was a streetscape tree. So a live oak, while it's a pretty tree and hardy, uproots the sidewalk, pushes it up, and so we're limited on what those can be. And some of them, I think, on the list were a mountain laurel or this or that. So I think the trick is with some of those smaller species like that. If we have one of those winners on occasion, we may have that. But once again, we'll have the caveat that says, if it goes away, you got to replace it. It just can't stay vacant.
that's the key. If one goes down, another goes up.
And we had asked them, based on your approval on the first tree, to select trees from the Chadburn Street project list so that they would be one of the same types of trees that are being planted along Chadburn. And so it was basically at the city's request that they picked from that list of trees, and that's the one they chose.
Okay. With that, do I have a motion for approval?
Move to approve as presented.
Seconded by Tommy. Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. We'll move to item D, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance for Z22-11 to rezone a property from the ranch and estate to the heavy manufacturing zoning district, being 20 acres located southwest of Old Ballinger Highway and North US Highway 277. John?
Thank you. You can see here on the aerial photo, this is a largely undeveloped area, farm and ranch land. There are some both businesses and homes throughout this area. You can see on our long-range plan that entire area is designated for industrial, but it currently has the blue is industrial zoning, but the green is ranch and estate, and so just kind of historically that's been zoned ranch and estate. So the request is to rezone that one piece to manufacturing, heavy manufacturing for, I believe, a concrete batch plant will go out there. And so, again, this is an area that's been designated for industrial. It's away from most other kind of commercial and residential properties. As I mentioned, there is a residential property. Actually, let me mention this real quick, that we did send out our notices to the surrounding properties, did not receive any responses. Again, you can see it's largely open. There is a home right next door to this, so they will be required to put up a fence between their property and the home. And in addition, they'll have to have a 100-foot separation, so any heavy manufacturing activity on the site can't be within 100 feet of that residential property that's next door. So they'll have to maintain that distance as well as the privacy fence between the two. Staff does recommend approval, as did the Planning Commission unanimously. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions for John on this item?
I
Lucy?
How long before they develop this concrete plant, batching plant?
I'd have to defer to the applicant on that. I'm not sure if anyone from them is here, but at this point, they're looking to rezone the property. I believe they're ready to move forward quickly, but as with these go, that sometimes happens, and sometimes it could be years before they actually move forward.
I move to approve as presented.
There is a motion. May I have a second? Seconded by Tommy. Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving item
Aye.
D, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. We'll move to item E, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance to amend the master thoroughfare plan to add the proposed northern alignment of the future interstate highway corridor located north of FM 2105 and connecting from U.S. Highway 87 on the west to U.S. Highway 277 and U.S. Highway 67 on the east.
This is an amendment to our thoroughfare plan. As you know, we have, as part of our comprehensive plan for the city, there is a thoroughfare plan or transportation plan for the long-range future of roads and highways within the city. And so this is an amendment to add the interstate corridor. I'll point out that this route is not something that city staff came up with. We're simply reflecting the route that is on TxDOT's plans for the northern portion of the interstate. All of the rest of the interstate corridor within town would be on existing highways, and so there's no new route other than this northern piece that would basically connect from 87 over to 277 and on through to 67. And so I know you'll hear some opposition, and while I appreciate the opposition of the neighbors in this area, again, we're simply trying to reflect on our future plans what TxDOT is deciding about this corridor. So in order to get the route of this changed, that would have to be done through the TxDOT process and the Federal Highway Administration as part of that interstate corridor. So we really have no control over where this is. We simply would like to get it on our plans so that as future development happens in this area, it's recognized on our plans. And for example, some
TxDOT had several public hearings and meetings on this proposed reliever route.
I believe so, and I'm not familiar with all of the dates of those, and if they may have been completed or there may be future public hearings still to go. I'm not 100% sure about that. But yes, this is a TxDOT process, and they've gone through. There were multiple alternatives that they looked at that looked a little different. They were all roughly in a corridor like this, but they had different options, and this was the selected option. And so again, if for example someone on one of these properties came in to develop a residential subdivision without this route being shown on our maps and on our plans, we would have no way to avoid somebody building a house right in the corridor. And so this is kind of a future planning tool to ensure that it's on our future plans. I think I've pretty much said all of this already. But again, this is reflecting it in our thoroughfare plan. We did send out notifications. This is an example where there are no required notifications to be sent out. We have historically always sent out to the affected property owners anytime there is a change to the thoroughfare plan that would affect their property. And so we've continued to do that in this case as well. I know that's a little frustrating for the property owners, particularly in this case. When it's a collector street or an arterial of the city, that really is your decision to decide where that goes. And so their input really can make a difference. In this case, again, we're just reflecting the TxDOT plans.
At this point, it's the TxDOT plan which they have approved. This is really not something we have the authority to change.
That's correct. The only thing we could do is pass information back to TxDOT with any concerns that citizens have or that you all have. But the route at this point, I don't want to say the route's set, because until they start construction, it can always change in the future. But this is their current conceptual map for this route. Staff does recommend approval of adding this to the Thoroughfare plan, as did the Planning the Planning Commission did not recommend approval. There was a tie vote, 3-3, on a motion to recommend approval. They were sympathetic to the concerns of some of the property owners in the area, and so the 3 that voted against it weren't comfortable adding this to the plan at this point. So it does come to you with no recommendation from the Planning Commission based on that tie vote. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Other questions for John James? Karen?
Yes, please. John, if you'd go back, yes, to the map that,
The notification map or the other? This one or?
no. The other, there you go. And so I see that the affected properties are parcel 11085 and 11097. Because the map is small, can you show us and the public
Those
with
two
your-
properties you just
with your
mentioned
cursor?
are right in there.
And this is the property owner with the historic ranch that was,
I believe that's the property that you got the letter from. Again, there were other property owners that spoke at the Planning Commission, and I believe some of them are here as well, and they can probably point out which specific properties they're here to speak to.
potential timeline for the interstate route right away to actually be,
That would be a
No
text
idea.
dot question. Having worked on similar projects in the past, I would say anywhere between like 1 and 20 years. I mean, it's really no,
It won't happen in our lifetime.
not in
Karen.
our lifetime.
It will in mine.
Well, now, Mayor, you may be right. You're so much younger than Karen and I.
this is very early in their process, and it really depends on federal funding and prioritization at the federal and state level. So it really could be, I suspect it wouldn't be less than 5 years for sure, and it could be 20 or 30 years for sure as well.
And what you are asking us to vote on has no particular effect on this homeowner at this time?
Not
No.
immediately.
Not immediately,
No.
at this time?
Correct. Really, the only impact on those property owners, if they were to go and develop their property as residential subdivisions or commercial development, they would have to pay attention to where that route is drawn so that they're not building things within that future route.
Other questions for John James?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Larry?
I'm trying to figure out how and what our voting on this does. Let's just presume that we vote it down. Does it make a single bit of difference in terms of what TxDOT has planned?
No, it does not. Now, I mean, obviously, that information would get back to them, but really, they have their own process to determine where these go and the timing and all of that. Really, the only impact would be we, the city, could not prevent development that might hinder that future route. And that's the main reason of having it on the Thoroughfare plan, is so that future development in that area can accommodate that future route.
The strategic plan from TxDOT for the future I-27 interstate corridor is that individual communities would start their own projects. So we would start our reliever route project. At some point, Lubbock would have theirs done, Sonora would have theirs done, there would be one for El Dorado, one for Cristoval, Loop, et cetera. And then there would be a day where they start to connect the reliever routes to the actual development of the interstate. But the first plan is to create the reliever routes. So generally speaking, in your lifetime, you would see the reliever route development. You may not see the completed interstate, but you would see segments of that interstate being developed. And that's the strategic plan. Still no timeline. Further questions from council? Do I have a motion?
So move.
So moved by Harry. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Tommy. We will now open it up for public comment. I know that there's some individuals here who would like to offer public comments, so please come forward, state your name, where you live, and add comment.
Good morning. My name is
Morning.
Charles Book. I'm from Miles. The land that I have under concern is on the corner of 208 and Red Creek Road. Do any one of you here have a special keepsake that's from your family? This land that I'm concerned about's been in my family since 1943. That's 79 years, 3 generations. My grandparents bought it and made it through the drought of the 50s with little or no help from the government. It's like a wedding ring, a special gun, a keepsake. It has no difference. This is no different than some of the old buildings that are here in San Angelo that we try to save. Both the land and those buildings are keepsakes. They are historical and believe that they have a desire to maintain our history. My family has already given land for the Ivy Water Line and the LCR, a power line, both of which were bad deals. We've already given twice, really don't want to give again. The proposed interstate will cut this piece of property in about half. Some acreage on both sides of the interstate. My concern about the safety of my family crossing the interstate, not to mention what excess we will have to the other side. This farm has maintained conservation practices, and that interstate will destroy that, and it will cause drainage issues coming into the north side of San Angelo. Another concern is the trash. Oh my goodness, the trash that's coming off of the highways. I have a place that's beside Highway 67. About twice a year, we have to pick up trash. Bottles, corn sacks, diapers that are blowed out in the field.
Continue. Finish your thoughts.
There's an old roadside park there that the state has abandoned. People still use it for a dump site. I see some problems on Houston Hart, Bell Street, Main Street exits, Chadburn exits. All that stuff concerns me. When the Ivy pipeline came through, they damaged our keepsake. When the power lines came through, they damaged our keepsake. Now the state wants to break it in half. When they cut this thing in half, there's not an upside for my family. That's
Thank you. Please come forward. Good morning.
My name is Jerry Don Moss. I'm a Llano County Commissioner. And as you know, we have this school land right out there on 87. And I'm not real sure, it's not real clear if this is going to affect us or not. It looks like part of this property or part of this new road would go across some of that school land. And we are very opposed to it. The public hearings that TxDOT has had, we weren't aware of. I just want to let you know today, or this morning, that we are opposed to that. And Mr. Miller, I believe he's wrong. It does matter how you vote today, because if you agree to this, TxDOT is fine with it. I've stood up to TxDOT several times as a commissioner. I've been a commissioner for about 18 years in Llano County, and it does matter if you vote to stand up for your constituents and their property and their rights. So I would urge y'all to not approve this amendment on here and instead send a resolution or something to TxDOT opposing this change. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment? No further public comment? All right. Then we'll take a vote on this item. We'll go individual by individual and take the vote. So we will start with Tommy.
Aye.
Harry.
Aye.
Larry.
Hey,
Karen.
Nay.
Lucy.
Aye.
Mayor. Aye. Motion passes 4-2. Item F, first reading and public hearing of ordinances amending the following. 1, Z22-02, an ordinance to approve a new historic district in downtown San Angelo located between Concho River, North Irving Street, East 4th Street, and South Oak Street. And 2, an ordinance amending Chapter 12, Planning Development of the City Code of Ordinances, Exhibit A-Zoning Ordinance, Section 211, Historic Overlay Zone, amending the criterion process for certification of appropriateness and demolitions, and establishing an administrative approval process. And 3, consider a resolution approving the city's historic preservation design guidelines for the Central Business District and expanding the boundary north to 4th Street. John, you're on.
Thank you. And Julie is passing a list of opposition. We only have the one copy. We do have it scanned, but we don't have, we didn't bring copies for everyone. So as that passes around, we'll just need to get that back, but we can get you copies later before second reading. This proposal actually does 3 things, and so I'll go through all 3. But the first is creating a downtown historic district. I'll come back to these maps in a minute, but a couple of years ago in 2020, the city commissioned a consulting firm to undertake a historic resources survey of the downtown. So basically what they did was look at every building within a large area of downtown. And so this is, you can see everything in the black boundary was the boundary of the area. They looked at every building, and it's hard to see on this map, but in your packet's a better map. But each of these little dots you can see are each of the buildings within that area, and every one was designated as high, medium, or low priority for as a historic resource. And I'll talk in a minute about exactly what those distinctions mean. This boundary here just shows the different boundaries. The purple boundary on the outside is our downtown design district. That's where any buildings' exterior improvements are already reviewed through a process. But the historic district basically takes that to another level in terms of not just looking at general design and compatibility, but specifically looking at the historic character of those buildings. And so, again, each property, each building within that area was designated high, medium, or low. High means that it's a building that contributes to the historic character of the area and is also eligible for National Register of Historic Places, which is a national registry of historic buildings. A medium means it is contributing to the historic character, but for whatever reason, it's not eligible for National Register. And then the buildings designated as low are those that really aren't contributing to the historic character. Either a building that's been modified so much that it no longer maintains its historic character, or a new building that has been built, within the last 50 years. So again, there are 3 proposed changes that we're looking at. One is creation of that new historic district. The city's ordinances already have a procedure and rules and regulations for a historic district. To this point, most of that historic zoning is on individual properties. So one property owner wanted their business or building designated historic, or at some point in the past, the city designated it historic. But this would be a similar kind of overlay, but for a larger area. The second thing we are looking at is amending the criteria for a certificate of appropriateness. That's actually what the approval is called. If somebody wants to make exterior changes to the building, they have to go to the Design and Historic Review Commission and get a certificate of appropriateness. And I'll talk about what those amendments would do in just a second. And then finally, adopting officially the Historic Preservation Design Guidelines. We've had those since 2010. The Design and Historic Review Commission uses that as their guidance for reviewing and approving changes to buildings. But we're bringing this to you for 2 reasons. One, to just officially endorse it, but also we're amending the boundary of that to make sure it includes all of the area within this proposed historic district. We did send out notifications as required, both within the area and within 200 feet. of property owners within the area. There were 144 notices that went out. That should actually be 8 now. We got another notice in support just yesterday, but so 8 owners in support and then 12 in opposition. And then within the 200 feet, so they're not affected by this, but they did get a notice, 1 additional in support and 2 in opposition. So again, the historic district is just this area in red. And so it includes basically 1 block on either side of Chadburn to Oaks, and then 1 block in the other direction to Irving, from the south end there almost to the river, and then up to, I think that's 3rd Street. And so one of the changes that we're looking at is for low priority properties, they would not be subject to the certificate of appropriateness. Since they're not deemed to be contributing to the historic character of the district, we didn't believe that they should be held to, historic design standards. So they would, for those properties, the rules really wouldn't change for them. The only change for those low designated properties are for demolitions. They still would have to get approval to demolish a building that's within the historic district. But then for all of the other buildings that are designated high and medium priority, they would have to go through that certificate of appropriateness process to get approval from the Design and Historic Review Commission. In some cases, one of the next proposal that is amending the ordinance would provide an administrative opportunity for some of those approvals, similar to what we have now in the downtown design district. Right now, if you get a certificate of appropriateness for a historic building, every single one of those has to go to the Design and Historic Review Commission. What we're proposing is to have a list of things, small signs, for example, like for like replacement. If you're changing the awnings and you're putting the exact same awnings up, that can be reviewed and approved by staff. It would not have to go to the commission. I think I've gone through those. Again, that's the new administrative process. And so this is just the list of items from the ordinance that would allow staff to approve those things without them going to the commission. So I won't read through all of these, but things like fences and landscaping, exterior painting. If you meet the historic color palette that's in our guidelines, you don't have to go to the commission. Staff can just approve that. If, for example, you want to paint it a color that's not a historic color palette, then you would have to go to the commission. Again, some other examples, construction that's not visible from the public right-of-way. If you can't see it from the street, then that's something that could be approved administratively. It wouldn't have to go to the commission. There are some advantages. I know a lot of the property owners, especially those opposed, focus on the disadvantages that they see, but our historic district rules that are already in place provide a tax abatement for those properties that have that historic designation. It's currently a minimum of $200 a year if you're a contributing property, and 20% of your taxes, that's capped at $1,000. And then for non-contributing properties, a minimum of $100 a year, but 10% up to $500. So there are tax advantages of being in a historic district. There's also, for projects, if you go onto a historic property and spend more than $10,000 on improvements, a portion of that can be abated in taxes as well. So it's similar to the tiers program. It's not the same, but this is basically an automatic abatement. If you're doing things to restore a historic building, you can get an automatic tax abatement for 50% of those expenses. And then finally, as I mentioned, the third thing we're doing here is adopting the Central Business District guidelines. This is a historic guidelines for that area. You can see in yellow here is the current boundaries of that. Again, that's been in place since 2010. All we're doing is moving that boundary up to make sure it includes all of the areas within this historic district. just some examples from the guideline. I think those guidelines were included in your packet, the full set of guidelines, but it provides just kind of general details on historic character as well as that color palette that I mentioned. So again, if you pick a color scheme that's on our list, you're automatically approved. You can still do other colors, but then you just have to go through a process. So staff is recommending approval of all three items: the adoption of the historic district, changes to the ordinance, and adoption of the guidelines. And the Design and Historic Review Commission approved those unanimously, 5-0. I'll just mention there was a recent change in state law. Normally, these zoning type items go through the DHRC and the Planning Commission and then to you all. The state law says you have to pick a commission or board to be the decider. Under our ordinances, that's the Design and Historic Review Commission. So we did present this to the Planning Commission yesterday just for their information, but there's no requirement that they vote on that. I know that was a lot of information very quickly, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I think this is one of the most important things that we can do as a city council. The number of people who visit San Angelo and comment on our historic district, it's an ongoing, consistent, daily comments from people from outside of our town. And they always use one of the greatest examples they give is Midland, who is not preserved or given any thought to their historic buildings. They've torn them down left and right and left and right. And the amount of people from Midland who come here and say, thank goodness that your city understood the importance, your citizens who owned the buildings downtown and spent the time, money, and effort to do it, makes your city so superior to our city because you have something. If we don't take care of our history, preserve our stories, preserve our heritage, and just let it continually be torn down, then we are doing a disservice to all those who came before us, the historic buildings, and an important, really, really important asset to the city of San Angelo, and that is our historic downtown. That's why people come to San Angelo and visit. You hear a lot about Diane Bays talking about 51% of the sales tax dollars come from outside the city. Historic downtown's a big part of those sales tax dollars that are brought to this city because of what we have done and has been done, and we need to ensure that we continue to protect and save what we have. We've already allowed many buildings to be torn down, which we now have big empty parking lots that are not an advantage to the way we look, and buildings that should have been saved but weren't required to be saved really changed the face of our downtown, and we cannot allow that to continue to happen. I am in strong support of this. Any other questions or comments from City Council? Harry?
Yes,
Yeah, this is one of these things that I started working on shortly after I became a council person. We really have to make sure that we're doing what's necessary to preserve what we've got downtown. I agree with the mayor. We really, if we'd had this in place 3 or 4 years ago, some of the buildings that have been taken down recently would not have had that. We wouldn't be in that particular position. So I support this, and I'll make a recommendation that we approve as presented.
On all three, right?
Yes, ma'am, all three.
Do I have a second? Karen
Ma'am,
seconds
I
it.
have a question.
Oh, wait, sure.
Just a question of clarification on your low historic designation. If the individual chooses to repaint the building, is he compelled to use the palette?
Well, no one is compelled to use the palette. Now, as I mentioned early on, all of these properties affected are already in the downtown design district, so they already have to go through a review process. For the paint, again, that's administratively approvable if it's on the color palette. If it's not, in the case of the historic district, again, that would have to go to the commission. But in terms of paint color, this change really doesn't affect it because the rules are basically the same for the existing downtown design district and this historic district. So for paint, this really doesn't reflect a change in terms of regulation.
Thank you.
Right, I have a motion and I have a second. The floor is open for public comment. Aye.
My name is Julie Hughes. My husband and I own property in this district that you're proposing. We have both sent in our opposition to this. I think at a time when we've been through a lot the past couple of years, much of it government imposed. We suffered inflation, gas. I can't find my brand of peanut butter right now. It's making me testy. But the idea that the only thing we have to do at this point is add another layer of unelected bureaucracy to people, subject them to this after what we've already been through. I really think you think that taking downtown back to the 19th century is progress. I don't see that as progress. I see individuals who own their property making their own decisions about their property. I see that as progress. And I know sometimes you may not like it because you own property down there. But it's their property, they pay taxes. This is just another overreach. You just want to control people who own property around your business, I believe. And you don't represent tourists from Midland. You represent the citizens and the taxpayers of San Angelo. And it just never ends. It's always another grab for power. It's always, most of our property values went up. And your historic design commission that you did a couple of years ago, when you did that, I think that's when you actually put up a website and called them abandoned and neglected properties. So you slandered properties owners' property in the downtown area. So I am opposed to this, and I wish that you could find something that would actually go towards helping the citizens of San Angelo instead of adding another requirement, more money, more regulations. Oh, please, when I have a repair, let me go and grovel in front of another board for a permit so that I can use my own money to upgrade my own property that I pay taxes on. It's becoming ridiculous. I'm going to pay close attention to this vote. I hope everyone in the room does. And I hope that there'll be some pushback against anyone who votes in favor of it. Thank you.
Any further public comment? Good morning.
Molly McClellan, Mr. Thompson is my councilman. I do believe in preserving history. I do believe that that is a treasure. However, I think you also have the responsibility to consider private property rights. And I would have a question too, that how many times has this historic district been expanded, and do you foresee any further expansion, or do you think that this is it? I mean, I really do feel like in a lot of these cases we're not considering the property owner's perspective of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment?
Good morning, Council. Good morning, Mayor. Monica Ramos, Assistant Director of Downtown San Angelo. Since 2019, from 2019 to 2021, Downtown San Angelo has seen 19 new businesses. And this year for 2022, so far, we've seen 8 new businesses. So people don't have a problem coming in to our historic downtown with the existing overlay zone that is already in place and putting their products and services out to the public. Downtown San Angelo is an attraction. It's the hub of our city. It's the heart of our city. People come here to shop, dine, visit the art, and most importantly, visit the historical appeal of our downtown. There are so many properties in downtown that have done rehabilitation to the interior of their properties, and they're creating a nostalgic and inviting atmosphere to our historic downtown San Angelo. And I'm sure they've seen many customers come in and they feel that this is something that is an attraction for them to come and visit San Angelo. It is a fact that tourists that seek culture and history tend to spend more money than those that travel for leisure. Some good examples are Fredericksburg and as well as Marfa, a tiny town of Marfa, who does have a historic district and was recently recognized on the National Historic Registry of Places. They have visitors from all over the world, and it is for their art and history. I believe that the process of the historic district will be more simplified, and of course, it only applies to the exterior of the property. So I believe that this will have a positive impact on our city of San Angelo and as well as our downtown to help it continue grow and bring tourism and dollars to our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor of
Mayor.
approving?
Before everybody votes, we just wanted everybody to know that this does require a supermajority of the council, so that would be a 6-0 vote today.
Thank you. We'll take a vote. We'll start with Tommy.
Aye.
Harry.
Aye.
Lucy.
Aye.
Karen. Aye. Larry.
Aye.
Brenda Gunter. Aye. Motion passes 6-0. We'll move to item G, first reading a public hearing to amend the budget ordinance for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2021 and ending September 30th, 2022 to delete a firefighter position and add a civilian position. Chief Patrick Brody, you are on.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. Patrick Brody, Interim Fire Chief. So our item this morning is basically a little housekeeping for the fire department. We received notice from our EMS instructor that he is intending to retire. Unfortunately, we do not have a person within our department that meets those qualifications. The big qualification would be EMS coordinator, and that process takes about 2 years in order to get certified for that. So my recommendation is to reclassify one of our uniform positions to
Do
civilian.
you have a screenshot for this?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am, I don't. It's in the background
know,
information.
But public watches
Oh, I
this
see. I
meeting.
got you. So, like I said, my recommendation is to reclassify one of our uniform positions to civilian. That'll give me the opportunity to cast a broader net to find the most qualified, certified personnel to lead our paramedic program into the future.
Do we have questions for Chief Brody?
I'd move approval, Mayor.
I have a motion and a second. Any public comment considering this item? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
We'll move to item H, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance amending the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2021 and ending September 30th, 2022 for fuel and materials due to inflation. Tina?
Morning, Mayor. Tina Darsky, Director of Finance. I just have, oh, that's the wrong one. I don't know where my slide is for this one, but this is just, in light of recent changes in gas prices, the Fleet Services Fund is short on their budget for fuel and materials, and so we are looking to increase the budget by $500,000 for gas and oil and $400,000 for materials. That is coming from our Fleet Services Manager, Ryan Kramer, and he thinks that that should get him through the end of this fiscal year. For the other, so that revenue source comes from other funds that use those services, as well as some external entities that we help as well. So the internal departments and funds will find existing savings within their budgets to supply that revenue source to the Fleet Services Fund.
My question is, we approved at last city council, I think, a $4 million fuel. So why did we approve $4 million on the 7th of June, and now we have a $500,000 request? I'm concerned about this.
This will help fund that contract, but I'll let Patrick come and speak.
Yeah, that should have been
how
one
those
big
are related.
presentation at one time period. There shouldn't be two separate items with two separate conversations.
Morning again, Mayor, Council. The item that Tina is presenting today is to continue through this fiscal year. The item that y'all approved last meeting, that was a multi-year contract for those supplies. So what we do, The $4 million is a annual expense, so that carries us through
Annual
the
meaning
following
start
fiscal
date.
years.
What's the start date?
October 1st.
Okay, so I'm not sure we were.
Well, the fuel contract actually starts from, that we approved last time, actually starts for the continuance of this fiscal year. The $4 million was an annual expense that carries the multiple years of that contract. So we bid it out, we award it for multiple years, so we get that economy of scale, and the vendors can plan, and the city can plan as we move forward as well. But the item that Tina's asking for, the $500,000, is just to continue through this fiscal year for planned fuel expenditures for the summer, for basically the summer term, and to continue through October 1st of this year.
And so did we go out for bids on this fuel? So how did we come up with the $500,000? What?
It is bid out. So the way we do our fuel is we bid out a delivery cost, basically a premium over rack. And so whether it's a 1 penny, 2 penny, 3 penny, and then on a daily basis, on an as-needed basis, we reach out to those approved vendors, ask them what their daily rack price is plus their delivery, and then we make that determination based on the lowest price at that time. So it's competitively bid for the markup, but the daily delivery or the as-needed delivery is bid out on a daily basis.
So, again, I'm kind of confused that we didn't have this as one budget. I mean, if we do $4 million worth of fuels starting October 1, and we haven't approved the 2022-2023 budget, but we've already approved a $4 million fuel expense.
We approved the expenditure up to $4 million underneath that contract. The actual expenditure, the money available, is approved through the budget process. So if you don't approve the $4 million, we can spend up to $4 million, but only what is allowed by the budget.
Questions from Daniel?
I know that at the beginning of the year, of course, we've established our budget based on forecasts as far as what it's going to look like. What we're saying right now is what we forecasted is not enough to get us through the fiscal year. So you're asking for an amendment, Tina, at this point to make sure that we can get through this fiscal year based on the fact that what we had projected is not enough at this point. That's it.
And I'm clear on that. What I'm not clear about is why, when we were talking about the $4 million, we didn't have a conversation about going to need to come back to City Council for an additional $500,000. That's what I'm not clear about, why they were two separate issues. I don't question the need for it. Obviously, fuel costs in everybody's household has gone up, so we're not surprised by the need for more fuel. I'm just kind of wondering why we did it this way. Doesn't make sense to me. Does not change the fact that we probably need to approve $500,000 worth of additional fuel, because we didn't know when we approved the 21-22 budget we would have fuel cost escalate.
Right.
Okay, with that, do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
So moved. Second? Second by Lucy. Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. I, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of City of San Angelo, Texas combination tax and limited surplus revenue certificates of obligation series 2022, appointing a pricing officer and delegating to the pricing officer, that's a new word, pricing officer, the authority to approve on behalf of the city the sale of the certificates, the terms of the certificates, and the offering documents for the certificates, establishing certain parameters for the approval of such matters by the pricing officer, approving the use of a paying agent and registrar agreement, leveling an annual ad valorem tax, and providing for the security for and payment of said certificates, providing an effective date, and enacting other provisions relating to the subject.
You can tell that caption came from an attorney.
Yes, you can.
So,
I'd like
council.
to see the job descriptions line by line in terms of these people. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Okay, so you approved the notification of intent on April 5th. This is related to our street reconstruction rolling debt program, and so this is $16 million that will be issued this year. This ordinance sets the parameters. Within certain parameters, I have Vince Fial from Specialized Public Finance here. He's our financial advisor. And this ordinance gives them authorization to work within those parameters that are in the ordinance. The debt will be amortized over a 20-year term. It's important to note that there will be no tax increase related to this debt issuance. And then this will go out to bid on June 23rd. And Vince and his folks will notify me as the pricing officer of the lowest bidder, which in terms of interest rate. And then that will give me the authorization to tell Vince to move forward with the process.
Based off of our past having some very low tax rates, what are we, I'm assuming we are assuming that the interest rate will not be as favorable this go around.
Let me have Vince speak to that if you don't mind.
You couldn't anticipate that question was coming, did you, Vince?
Mayor, council members, good morning. For the record, my name is Vince Viel. We're the municipal advisor for the city of San Angelo. As Tina said, we're going to go out for bid on the COs Thursday. We're going to get bids on the interest rate from bidders in the marketplace. Rates have gone up over the last few weeks, as you're aware. We still have this $16 million in the model for the city. We anticipate no tax rate increase as a result of this because this is our ongoing rolling debt program. We issue these COs for street purposes as our tax base grows. The strategy behind this is to keep our tax rate constant and not increase our tax rate for debt service.
That's what we need to know.
Yes, ma'am.
Questions for Vince while he's up there? Any other questions for Tina on this item? I think you were given a lot of information ahead of this meeting to review. So with that, do I have a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Lucy, and seconded by Harry. Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes 6-0. Item J, discussion and possible action nominating citizens to a charter review committee. And Julia, you're on for this.
Yes, ma'am. Every 2 years, the state does allow a city's charter to be amended. Our charter was last looked at in 2015, so this is a legal charter review, and we just wanted to know if the council had an appetite for that, and if so, who they would like to appoint.
So you're saying that should there be any items put on a November ballot, that it cannot be put on a November ballot without a city charter review?
No, council can authorize something to be put on a ballot, but a lot of times councils will appoint a committee. That way they get outsiders' perspectives instead of
It's
just
not required.
staff. It's not required.
Does council have an appetite for creating this charter review committee? I'd like some comments. Oh, Harry, please.
As a member of the last Charter Review Committee before I became councilperson, I will have to say it is an opportunity to make sure that our charter is in alignment with the state statutes and also to clean up anything that may be in there. To take a serious look at any item on the charter that we may want to take to the citizens for their review. So I support it. I think it's a good opportunity to see what's out there.
Any other comment?
I would echo what Harry said, Mayor. To me, it's a part of the process over, and we don't have a defined number of years, but that it's a process that we should go through to just have it reviewed. So I am in support, Mayor.
Lucy?
I'm also in support of it, just for the mere fact that it has been since 2015, since it's been looked at, and maybe they'll find out things, excuse me, that do need to be updated.
Any other comment, Karen or Larry? No, with none. All right, so do we need to make the nominees today, or is it just that we are going to approve creating a charter committee, and then each council member will then appoint someone to this committee? Do those names need to be consider today?
The council does need to approve the list of the committee members. So I would advise, if you're ready today, it'd be better so that they can start moving forward, since it is kind of a tight timeline between now and November. And the other thing you might want to consider is whether or not you want to give them a focus of certain sections of the charter, or if you want them to look at the charter as a whole.
I have heard Teresa James on several occasions comment that there's some areas of the charter that she thinks needs to be cleaned up, that would be more issues about legal perhaps than about general philosophy about doing some things. So if we put together our own charter, how does legal interact with this charter committee in adding or overseeing or answering questions for this committee?
I actually was coming on board last time we had a charter committee, so I think I made one meeting and then they gave their recommendation. Julia and I, throughout the years, have been marking things in the charter as processes have come up for clarification. We can just present those to the committee and say these are the things that need to be cleaned up from a legal perspective or a process perspective, just so they're aware. But if there are other specific areas for focus, I think that would be appropriate to delegate to them.
Mayor, if I may?
Yes, please, Daniel.
So, and what Teresa said is correct. Of course, the city staff can make a recommendation based on our study and our review. One of the areas that's come up, and it's come up again, is the review specifically for the chief of police, elected chief of police, or appointed chief of police. Really, the charter committee nominees that we'll be talking about here in just a little while, what I would love to see happen is to ensure that this group has an opportunity to do an objective evaluation, research on the topic or the merits of an elected chief versus an appointed chief, and come back with a recommendation. I do believe that the individuals that are listed, that we'll name here in just a little bit, are an objective bunch. There's a great representation in there, to include one from the police department. And we just want to make sure that moving forward, that the recommendation is made is a solid recommendation that the city council can act on to call that vote if necessary.
So on that particular subject, would there be a separate committee PAC that would work to go out and educate and communicate to the public the reason for?
No, ma'am. Specifically, the charter committee is only going to be reviewing the charter itself. The discussion on that would be from a different group if that ever comes to be. But on our end, what we're trying to do is just to establish a committee right now that'll do the research to give their recommendation so that the city council can make a decision by August to either move forward with that election or not. So this is really what this is about. And this group will do that really important research, that very objective research, to come back with a recommendation to the city council members. City staff on the other issues that Teresa just talked about, we can research those other issues and come back and give a recommendation. But really, the individuals that are listed here are more specific to, we would highly recommend that the city council give the direction that this group would be the ones that research the elected versus the nominated chief of police, again, on the merits associated with either one of those.
All right, then the next question I have is basically some of these things, including that item as a discussion, there's going to be a timeline. So what we need to understand is what's the timeline that these the recommendations must come. I don't guess, do we approve the recommendations from this committee?
So the ballot language would have to be approved by the city council no later than Monday, August 22nd.
So we've really given this committee a month legitimately to sit and meet and talk and discuss. So it's going to require a lot of immediate meetings and
correct.
action, because you
Yes,
would
ma'am.
be running out of time. So this is a timing issue.
It is a 2-month timeline, Mayor, and we would expect that the charter committee members, we would expect that would meet on a weekly basis until that recommendation is made by them by the August 22nd timeline. So yes, you're correct, Mayor. That's something that's going to be kind of an intensive deal, meeting on a weekly basis until the recommendation is given to the city council members.
Okay. Other questions for Daniel, for Teresa, for Julia on this item? All right, then do I need a motion to approve nominating citizens?
Could we
Or
get
a
the-
motion to include creating this charter review committee as well as the names of the people at the same time?
I think the most efficient way to do it would be to go down the list of each council member, get their name, and then take a motion on the committee as a whole.
Okay. Lucy?
Billy DeWitt.
Karen?
John Austin Stokes.
Larry?
Ronald Graham.
Harry?
Andy Poole.
Tommy?
Mark Lack.
Brenda Gunter? Judge Alan Gilbert?
Mayor,
And then,
yeah, Mayor Tom's not available today, but his nominee would be David Howard.
so from the police department?
Yes, ma'am.
Assistant Police Chief.
Correct.
All right, so do I have a motion to approve a charter review committee and the members of that committee as just declared?
I move to approve.
Lucy makes that motion. Do I have a second? A second by Harry. Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes 6-0. We will now, that concludes our regular agenda for today. We will move into closed session. The executive session under provision of Government Code Title V, Open Government Ethics, Subtitle A, Open Government, Chapter 551, Open Meetings, Subchapter D, exceptions to requirement that meetings be open under the following sections. A, Section 551.071, consultation with attorney regarding UCRA agreements, and Section 551.072, deliberations about real property regarding 316.879 acres in the Sarah R. Robertson S-0178A-8474. We will be adjourned for the closed session at this point. And the time is 10:09. This meeting will be called back to order at 10:56 on June 21st. There are no announcements to be made from executive session. So at this point, we will ask if there's any announcements and consideration for future agenda items from anyone on council. Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion for adjournment.
Mayor, first of all, when is our next meeting? July
7th.
7th, okay.
July 7th. It's a Thursday.
Move we
July 7th,
adjourn.
but we have a budget meeting on June 26th, I think is the date. Tuesday. Next Tuesday. Okay. And we'll discuss the enterprise funds. Well, whatever the date is.
It's going to be July 26th. It's a Tuesday. June 26th would be a Saturday or Sunday.
Let me see.
So it's July 26th.
Sure we're all on the same page. So our next city
Hold on.
normal meeting will be on the 7th of July. And then we have right now planned for the 26th of July, the enterprise funds for the city budget.
It was right, Mayor. It was just a
Yeah,
good month.
and
so.
then we have city council on the 2nd of August, and then the budget for the general fund on August the 9th. Okay? All right, with that, do I have a motion for adjournment?
Move we adjourn.
Okay, in a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. We are officially